How did one man, born on a tiny island, become the single greatest threat to the Roman Republic, using only his mind? This is the story of Archimedes, a figure who transcends his time, a mind so potent that his name became synonymous with genius itself. He was forged in the crucible of Syracuse, a bustling, powerful, and strategically vital Greek city-state located on the eastern coast of Sicily. Syracuse was not a provincial backwater. It was a jewel of Magna Graecia, a dominant force in the central Mediterranean, a crossroads of commerce and culture, and a frequent player in the high-stakes geopolitical games of its day caught between the rising power of Rome and the established dominance of Carthage. It was into this dynamic world that Archimedes was born around 287 BC. His origins, while not entirely clear, were far from humble. According to the accounts of Plutarch, he was not just a citizen, he was intimately connected to the city's leadership. King Hiron II, the long-reigning and pragmatic ruler of Syracuse, wasn't merely a distant patron who recognized a budding talent. He was, by some accounts, a close relative, possibly a cousin or even uncle to the young mathematician. This royal connection, this proximity to power, was perhaps the most crucial variable in Archimedes' life. It afforded him something more valuable than gold, absolute freedom. He was unburdened by the need to earn a living in a conventional sense. He was not required to teach, to practice a trade, or to manage an estate. His life's purpose, supported and encouraged by the crown, was the singular pursuit of pure intellect, to chase the boundaries of knowledge, to wrestle with the fundamental problems of the universe, and to see how far the human mind could truly go. This patronage gave him the resources, the time, and the security to dedicate his entire existence to thought, and in doing so, he would forever change the world he inhabited. If you are finding this journey into the mind of a genius as fascinating as we do, this is the perfect moment to support our channel. We pour countless hours into researching, writing, and producing these deep dives into history's most incredible stories. By taking just a second to click that like button, you help this video reach more people who share our passion. If you haven't already, please consider hitting the subscribe button and ringing that notification bell. It's the single best way to ensure you never miss an episode, and it tells us that you want more content just like this. And finally, if you know someone who loves history, science, or just a truly epic story, please share this video with them. Every single like, subscription, and share directly fuels our ability to continue creating this content for you. Thank you for being a part of our community. Syracuse was his home, the bastion that protected him, and the city he would one day be called upon to defend. But Alexandria was his school, the forge where his intellect was truly sharpened. In his youth, Archimedes undertook the pivotal journey to Egypt, a journey that was fast becoming a rite of passage for the brightest minds of the Hellenistic world. He traveled to the city founded by Alexander the Great, which had, by the 3rd century BC, eclipsed even Athens as the undisputed intellectual capital of civilization. At its heart was the Museum, a temple to the Muses that was less a religious site and more the world's first true university, and its legendary sister institution, the Great Library of Alexandria. This was not merely a collection of scrolls. It was a public-funded institute where the greatest scholars of the age were paid to live, eat, and most importantly, to think, debate, and write. Here, Archimedes walked among giants. He immersed himself in the foundational works of the masters who had come before him, most notably Euclid, whose Elements had been compiled in this very city just a few decades earlier. Archimedes would have meticulously studied Euclid's rigorous, axiomatic approach to geometry, a method that would become the bedrock of his own mathematical proofs. But Alexandria was not just about the past, It was about the vibrant present. He formed relationships and began a lifelong correspondence with the intellectual superstars of his time. He exchanged letters, problems, and proofs with figures like Canon of Samos, a brilliant mathematician and astronomer whom Archimedes deeply respected, and Eratosthenes of Cyrene, the polymath chief librarian of Alexandria, who famously calculated the circumference of the earth with stunning accuracy. This correspondence, carried by messengers across the sea, became his peer review, his sounding board, and his intellectual battlefield, a forum where he would pose challenges and solve problems that no one else in the world could even touch. This, then, was Archimedes' most radical idea, the philosophical underpinning of his entire life's work. The universe was not, as many of his contemporaries and ancestors believed, a chaotic and unpredictable plaything of fickle, warring gods. It was not a realm of pure chance and divine whim. Instead, Archimedes operated from the profound conviction that the universe was a rational, ordered, logical, and ultimately knowable place. He was a true heir to the Platonic and Pythagorean traditions, which saw mathematics as the divine language, the hidden structure of reality. But Archimedes took this a giant leap further. He believed that everything, from the grandest motions of the stars in the sky to the simplest, most mundane rock resting on the ground, obeyed consistent, discoverable, and immutable laws. And the language of these laws, the master key to unlocking all of reality's secrets, was not philosophy or rhetoric, but the pure, uncompromising logic of mathematics and geometry. This was a revolutionary stance. While others observed the world and described it, Archimedes sought to prove it. He was not content with simple observation or approximation. He demanded rigorous, logical, step-by-step proofs for his discoveries, proofs so solid they were as undeniable as the axioms of Euclid. He was, in essence, inventing the entire field of mathematical physics, applying the abstract perfection of geometry to the messy, physical world, and demonstrating that the world, too, was perfect and logical in its design. The legend is famous, perhaps the most famous eureka moment in the history of science, a story that has echoed through millennia. King Hiero II, his patron and relative, commissions a new votive crown to be dedicated to the gods. He provides a specific, carefully weighed amount of pure gold to a goldsmith. The artisan returns with a masterpiece, a crown of exquisite workmanship, and it weighs exactly the same as the gold he was given. And yet, the king, a shrewd and worldly man, harbors a suspicion. He suspects the craftsman has defrauded him, siphoning off some of the precious gold and replacing it with an equal weight of a cheaper, less dense metal like silver, and then plating the entire thing in gold to hide the deception. The problem is immense: how to prove the fraud without destroying the beautiful crown. He cannot simply melt it down to check its purity. Hiero, as he so often did, turns to his resident genius. Archimedes is perplexed. He obsesses over the problem, the relationship between weight, volume, and purity. The legend, as told by the Roman architect Vitruvius, states that a frustrated Archimedes went to the public baths to relax. As he stepped into a full tub, he watched the water spill over the side. In that simple, everyday observation, a profound insight struck him like a bolt of lightning. He realized that a submerged object displaces a volume of water exactly equal to its own volume. This was the key. He understood instantly that if the crown were a mix of gold and silver, it would be less dense than pure gold. Therefore, to achieve the same weight, it would have to have a larger volume. A larger volume would, in turn, displace more water than an equal weight of pure gold. He could compare the displacement of the crown to the displacement of an identical weight of pure gold. If the crown displaced more water, it was a fake. The solution was so sudden, so perfect, that he allegedly leaped from the tub and ran naked through the streets of Syracuse, shouting "Eureka! Eureka!" Greek for "I have found it. I have found it." This story, whether literally true or not, marks the conceptual birth of hydrostatics and the principle of buoyancy, all from a king's suspicion and a genius's bath. "Give me a place to stand, and I will move the earth." This is arguably Archimedes' most audacious quote, a statement that rings with such supreme confidence it borders on divine arrogance. But for Archimedes, this wasn't an arrogant boast, it was a simple, logical statement of mathematical certainty. He was the first person in history to mathematically formalize and prove the law of the lever, the fundamental principle of mechanical advantage. While levers had been used intuitively for millennia to move heavy objects, no one before Archimedes had understood or codified the precise mathematical relationship between effort, load, and the distance from the fulcrum. He proved, with geometric rigor, that a small force could move a massive weight, provided the lever was long enough and the fulcrum was placed correctly. To demonstrate the staggering, almost magical power of this principle to his skeptical patron, King Hiero, Archimedes reportedly staged a public demonstration. He had a massive ship from the royal fleet of fully laden trireme, according to some accounts, dragged onto the shore. He then by himself, using only his intellect and a system of compound pulleys, an invention he refined based on the same lever principle, single-handedly, and with little apparent effort, pulled the massive fully manned ship across the beach and into the water. The crowd and the king were left in stunned silence. Archimedes had proven his point in the most dramatic way possible. He had demonstrated that the physical limitations of a single man could be overcome by the power of the mind. His boast about moving the earth was not a practical proposal. It was a declaration that, given the right tools derived from correct mathematical understanding, no weight was immovable, no problem was unsolvable. His genius was not confined to the purely theoretical or the grand, earth-moving boasts. It was also profoundly practical, grounded in solving the real-world problems of his city and his time. Among his most famous and enduring practical inventions is the Archimedes screw, a device of such brilliant, elegant simplicity that it remains in use to this day. Over 2 millennia later, the device consists of a helical blade, like a corkscrew, set inside a hollow cylinder. When the bottom end is placed in water and the entire mechanism is turned originally by hand or by treading, the spiral blade scoops up a volume of water and with each turn lifts it higher and higher until it pours out the top. This invention, said to have been developed after his time in Egypt to help drain and irrigate the Nile Delta, revolutionized agriculture by allowing farmers to move water uphill from rivers to their fields. It was also used in mining to pump water out of flooded shafts and on ships to bilge water from their holds. Its impact was immediate and profound. And yet, this was what Archimedes did in his spare time. His true passion was pure mathematics, and one of his greatest achievements in that realm was tackling one of the most elusive and foundational numbers in all of nature, pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. Before Archimedes, pi was known only through rough, empirical approximations. Using his method of exhaustion, a concept that prefigured calculus, he meticulously inscribed a polygon inside a circle and circumscribed another polygon around it. He knew the true value of pi lay somewhere between the perimeters of these two polygons. By doubling the number of sides on the polygons from 6 to 12, 24, 48, and finally to 96-sided polygons, he exhausted the area of the circle, squeezing the value of pi into an increasingly narrow range. His final calculation, all done by hand without the benefit of decimals, concluded that pi was not a simple number into 14 BC, Archimedes' serene world of pure theory, of circles, levers, and numbers, collided with the brutal, chaotic reality of war. The Second Punic War, the colossal struggle for Mediterranean dominance between the Roman Republic and the Carthaginian Empire led by Hannibal, was raging. Syracuse, which had long maintained its independence through a careful treaty with Rome under the stable rule of King Hiero II, was thrown into turmoil. Hiero died, and his young, impulsive grandson, Hieronymus, took the throne. Swayed by Carthaginian promises, he made a fatal miscalculation. He broke the treaty with Rome and allied Syracuse with Hannibal. The Roman response was swift, predictable, and overwhelming. Rome could not tolerate a powerful, hostile city-state in Sicily, a perfect staging ground for Carthaginian forces. A massive Roman fleet and army, under the command of one of their most celebrated and hardened generals, Marcus Claudius Marcellus, was dispatched to besiege the city. The Syracusans, trapped behind their formidable walls, seemed doomed. The Roman war machine was the most efficient and unstoppable force the world had yet seen. They had accounted for the walls, the soldiers, the supplies, and the harbor. But in their meticulous planning, they had failed to account for one decisive, asymmetrical variable: the mind of a single, 73-year-old man. The mathematician Archimedes was about to become the most terrifying war engineer the world had ever known. Archimedes, loyal to his home city, unleashed a storm of mechanical terror upon the Roman attackers. As the Roman ships, confident in their numbers, advanced on the seaward walls, they were met not with arrows and spears, but with the full force of Archimedes' ingenuity. He had designed and arrayed a terrifying variety of catapults and ballista. These were not the standard, one-size-fits-all artillery. Archimedes had engineered them to be precise, adjustable, and devastating. He had massive engines that could hurl stones weighing hundreds of pounds, smashing the hulls and decks of distant ships. Even more terrifyingly, he had smaller, more scorpionic machines designed for rapid-fire anti-personnel work, and crucially, he had calculated the exact trajectories and ranges. The Romans, as described by the historian Polybius, were met with a storm of projectiles at every range, from long-distance boulders to short-range darts, creating a kill zone from which there was no escape. But his most nightmarish invention, the one that broke the Roman morale, was the claw of Archimedes. As described by ancient historians, this was a massive, crane-like device, hidden behind the city walls, a long, counterweighted beam extended over the ramparts, at the end of which was a massive, iron grappling hook. As a Roman ship like the Sambuca, a siege tower on a ship nosed close to the wall, the claw would drop, its hook biting deep into the ship's prow. Then the operators inside the wall, using a system of pulleys and counterweights, would lift the entire front of the Roman quinquireme clear out of the water, holding it vertical and shaking it violently until the soldiers on board were tossed into the sea. Then the operator would release the ship, letting it drop and smash against the rocks or capsize. Completely destroyed, the psychological impact was absolute. The Romans became so terrified that if they saw so much as a piece of rope or a beam of wood appear over the wall, they would break formation and flee, screaming that Archimedes was attacking them again. The most legendary and spectacular of Archimedes' supposed weapons is also the most controversial: the heat ray or death ray. The story, which surfaces in later accounts, most notably by Lucian in the 2nd century AD, is cinematic. It claims that Archimedes used a series of polished bronze shields or a large, hexagonal mirror to act as a parabolic reflector. By coordinating soldiers, he focused the intense Sicilian sunlight onto the Roman ships, concentrating the beams onto a single point until the wooden hulls burst into flame, setting the Roman fleet ablaze from a distance. But did it really happen? This question has fascinated scientists and historians for centuries. Modern attempts to recreate it have yielded mixed and mostly negative results. The famous Mythbusters television show, after several attempts, declared the myth busted, arguing that while a singe point could be heated, it would be incredibly difficult to get a wooden ship, which is often damp, to its auto-ignition temperature before the ship could simply move, or the soldiers holding the shields lost their focus. Other experiments, including one by a team at MIT, suggested it was plausible under ideal conditions, perhaps by creating smoke and confusion rather than an inferno. Skeptics argue that it's far more practical to use flaming arrows or catapults to deliver fire. However, even if the death ray wasn't a true ship killer, it's possible the story is a dramatic exaggeration of a real device. The focused mirrors could have been used as a powerful psychological weapon, creating a blinding, terrifying flash of light that disoriented and panicked Roman sailors and marines. Or, as some have theorized, it could have been used to dazzle the operators of the Roman siege engines, effectively blinding them. Whether a true weapon of mass destruction or a brilliant piece of psychological warfare, the legend of the heat ray endures as a testament to a mind so advanced, it seemed capable of wielding the sun itself. In one of his most fascinating, and for its time, mind-bending works, The Sand Reckoner, Archimedes set out to solve a seemingly playful, almost childlike problem: to calculate the total number of grains of sand it would take to fill the entire universe. But this was no idle game. To even begin, he had to solve two monumental problems. First, the Greek system for writing numbers was cumbersome and ill-equipped for truly immense quantities. It lacked a concept like our modern scientific notation. So, Archimedes had to invent a new system. For all his practical inventions and earth-shattering calculations, Archimedes himself stated, and his biographers affirmed, what he considered his single greatest and most beautiful discovery. It wasn't the lever, the screw, or the claw. It was a pure, elegant geometrical proof, the precise mathematical relationship between a sphere and the cylinder that perfectly circumscribes it, meaning the cylinder's height and diameter are equal to the sphere's diameter. Through a series of brilliant proofs, Archimedes was the first person in history to demonstrate that the volume of the sphere is exactly 2/3 to thirds the volume of the cylinder that encloses it. Even more beautifully, he proved that the surface area of the sphere is also exactly 2/3 the total surface area of that same cylinder, including its top and bottom. This discovery, which he detailed in his 2-volume work on the sphere and cylinder, was the pinnacle of his life's work. To him, it represented the perfect harmony of the universe, a fundamental, hidden truth of geometry revealed. It was a discovery that, in its method, involved slicing the shapes into an infinite number of infinitesimally thin planes. To compare them, a revolutionary technique that was, in all but name, the very essence of integral calculus, a branch of mathematics that would not be formally invented for almost 2,000 years. This was his proudest achievement, the one he felt best encapsulated his life's work. For centuries, one of his most brilliant and revolutionary works was thought to be lost forever, a mere rumor of his true genius. This work was the method of mechanical theorems, a letter he had sent to his friend Eratosthenes in Alexandria. In it, he described not just his final, rigorous proofs, but the secret mechanical method he used to first discover his theorems. The manuscript's journey is a story in itself. It survived for centuries in Constantinople, but in the 13th century, with parchment scarce, a monk scraped the priceless text clean, washing away Archimedes' insights. He then cut the pages, turned them sideways, and wrote over them with a euchologion, a common prayer book. This palimpsest, a reused manuscript, was eventually rediscovered in 1906 by the Danish scholar Johann Heiberg, who recognized the faint geometric diagrams underneath the prayers. It wasn't until the late 20th and early 21st centuries, using advanced multispectral imaging and X-ray fluorescence, that scholars were finally able to decode the ghost text hidden beneath. What they found was staggering. The palimpsest revealed Archimedes' true genius in all its glory. He described how he would mentally weigh the areas and volumes of different shapes. By balancing them on an imaginary mechanical lever, he was treating areas and lines as if they had mass, using physics to solve math problems. He was, in effect, using a form of calculus and reasoning with concepts of actual infinity. Heuristic ideas so advanced they would not be invented again by thinkers like Cavalieri, Newton, and Leibniz for nearly 2,000 years. This was his secret weapon, his method of discovery, which he would then prove rigorously to satisfy the standards of his day. Into 12 BC, after a long and brutal siege that had been stalled for almost 2 years by Archimedes' genius, Syracuse finally fell. The city's defenses were not breached by force, but undone by treachery. During a festival, a pro-Roman faction opened a gate, and the Roman legions, hardened and furious from their long wait, poured into the city. General Marcellus, the Roman commander, was a ruthless soldier, but he was also an educated man of the Hellenistic world. He had given a specific, standing order to his men. The city could be sacked, but the great genius Archimedes was to be taken alive and unharmed. Marcellus deeply respected his mind and wanted to meet him, perhaps even make him a client of Rome. But in the chaos and violence of the sack, the order was lost. The story of Archimedes' death, as told by Plutarch, is a tragic legend, a perfect encapsulation of the conflict between pure thought and brutal power. A Roman soldier, dispatched to find him, burst into the 75-year-old man's home. He found Archimedes not begging for his life or hiding his treasures, but completely absorbed in a mathematical problem, drawing diagrams in the sand or on a dust-covered tablet. When the soldier rudely demanded he come immediately to see General Marcellus, Archimedes allegedly waved him off, muttering what would become his final words, "Do not disturb my circles." The soldier, ignorant of who this old man was and enraged by his defiance, drew his sword and killed him on the spot. The greatest mind of the ancient world was extinguished by an anonymous grunt. In a moment of casual violence, Archimedes was buried in Syracuse, and as the generations passed and Rome's dominance became absolute, his name and his final resting place were quickly forgotten by the local populace. His fame lived on in texts, but his physical connection to the city faded. Generations later, in 75 BC, the great Roman orator, statesman, and philosopher Marcus Tullius Cicero was serving as a quaestor in Sicily. Cicero was a profound admirer of Greek culture and of Archimedes, whom he considered one of the sharpest minds in all of history. He found it a disgrace that the Syracusans no longer knew where their most famous citizen was buried. He made it his personal mission to find the lost tomb. He began searching the overgrown graveyards outside the city's Agrigentine Gate, a place he knew was thick with ancient tombs. He scoured the area, reading the worn inscriptions on countless forgotten sarcophagi. Finally, after a long search, he found it. He didn't identify it by a name, which had long since worn away. He identified it exactly as Archimedes himself had wished, by the marker he had requested be carved on his headstone. There, overgrown with thorns and bushes, was a small column topped with the carved image of a sphere and a cylinder, the symbol of his favorite, most perfect discovery. Cicero, in a moment of profound historical connection, had the area cleared and the tomb restored, paying homage to the man whose mind he so admired. After Cicero's visit, the tomb was lost to history once more, and this time, it seems, for good. His death at the hands of a Roman soldier was a tragedy, but it was not the end of his legacy. Though much of his most advanced work, like the method, would be lost for centuries, sinking beneath the sands of time during the long decline of the Roman Empire and the subsequent Dark Ages, his core writings were painstakingly preserved by Byzantine scholars in Constantinople. During the Renaissance, as the West rediscovered the knowledge of the ancients, these texts were translated into Latin and fell into the hands of a new generation of brilliant, curious thinkers. The impact was electric. A young Galileo Galilei, before he ever looked through a telescope, read Archimedes. He cited Archimedes as his greatest influence, his master, and even wrote his first scientific paper, La Bilancetta, the Little Balance, on an improvement to Archimedes' hydrostatic principle. For measuring density, he used Archimedes' mathematical principles of physics to begin his revolutionary studies of motion, toppling the stagnant, thousands-year-old doctrines of Aristotle. Later, Isaac Newton, as he was in the process of creating calculus, built upon the foundations that Archimedes had laid, particularly his method of exhaustion, which Newton acknowledged as a precursor to his own theory of fluxions. The echo of that single shout in a Syracuse bath, Eureka, has reverberated through 2,000 years of human history. It was a cry that heralded the birth of mathematical physics, and it was a sound that was picked up and amplified by the giants of the scientific revolution, solidifying Archimedes' title not just as the greatest mind of antiquity, but as one of the single greatest and most influential minds in all of human history.